Radio Al Ansar Podcasts.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening. Welcome to listeners. This is Business Matters brought to you by Minara Chamber of Commerce. I'm Nazreen Ibrahim live at the Durban studios. Thank you very much for joining us. This evening we've got one particular topic of focus on the show. It's around the upcoming BRICS summit happening in Durban. Now there has been a lot of talk around BRICS, what it means, the number of foreign delegates coming into the country for various sessions, whether it's in Cape Town, Johannesburg or Durban. We'll get a clearer view with our guest in a few moments on the show, CEO of Trade and Investment TIKZN, who are leading the initiative for BRICS in Durban coming up on the 17th and 18th of August. But while you're listening, let's take a look at some of our headlines before we jump into that conversation with Neville. And just looking through some of the headlines happening over the last few days. Many of you may have seen the headline going around of Standard Bank closing independent media's accounts. There have been many independent columnists writing that it's an attack on all South Africans, including media and press freedom. Standard Bank issued letters to independent media and 30 other companies in the Sekunjalo group, informing them of the closure of their business bank accounts on August 21st, is written here. This was probably last year sometime. The bank's communication comes up after a Commission Appeal Court of SA ruling that upheld the decision taken by 3 banks to stop offering their services to the companies. One columnist called it fairly disgusting practice due to it being hypocritical and dishonest. Your thoughts will be most welcome on the WhatsApp line. I will get the number shortly and give it to you. But if you don't know it, I will be given it right now. Next up in the headlines, which I'm just looking through just to give you a sense of what's been going down in the business world. Botswana plans extra diamond sale routes after De Beers deal. Interesting enough, Botswana State Diamond Company is planning to diversify how far it sells precious stones to the market. Gears up to receive far more supply under a multi-year deal the country struck with producer De Beers in July. Just one of the headlines I see coming up. Government flags delays with the Energy Action Plan. I just want to look a little bit more at the detail of that particular story. Government has presented a 12-month evaluation of the Energy Crisis Plan. This is reminiscent of when they talked about the delay in the release or the sale of the spectrum and freeing up the spectrum for digital use, moving away from analog use. That comes. So in the same vein, government are now reporting, the Minister of Electricity, Khosienso Ramakgopa, in a report back briefing on Sunday, said that of the 50 actions in the plan, 8 had been completed and 20 were on track. But 2 had not yet begun and 8 were categorized as off track with intervention needed. The plan is coordinated by the NECOM, National Energy Crisis Committee, in the presidency. And the minister has had regular report backs on progress since his appointment last year. Another interesting headline, SA spurns US pressure to stop using China's Huawei tech. South Africa won't give in to pressure from the US to stop using Huawei technologies on its networks, the country's ambassador to the 5-nation BRICS bloc said. Interesting in the face of what we're going to talk about now, which is BRICS. Remember that this show is brought to you by the Minara Chamber of Commerce. Please visit the website for all bookings for our upcoming dinner and awards event coming up in October. But I'll give you more details about that. We'd like to get on the line now our guest, Neville Matjies, CEO at Trade and Investment TIKZN, to talk to us about BRICS. And I want to understand a bit more around what's the expectation of this particular event happening here in this province and in this city. What's the expectation of the main summit happening in Johannesburg? What are the outcomes and the purpose? And what are some of the commitments that have been made in the bloc that would like to be realized or achieved coming up in August? And some very important conversations. The presidency released a statement on the 19th of July, which was probably the last statement on their website, where it read, President Cyril Ramaphosa has confirmed South Africa's readiness to host the historic 15th summit of BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, as you know. Just on a side note, a lot of news and development around many other countries showing an interest to become member states of the BRICS bloc, one of them being Saudi Arabia, who has expressed a keen interest. Going on in the statement, the presidency wrote, it will be the first BRICS summit to be hosted in person since the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent global restrictions. President Ramaphosa has in recent months and weeks, held a number of consultations on the hosting of the summit. The President's most recent consultation in this regard took place last night, which was 18th of July. That was about 2.5 weeks ago at the BRICS Political Dialogue in Gauteng. The summit will be attended by the leaders of Brazil, India, China and South Africa. By mutual agreement, President Vladimir Putin of the Russian Federation will not attend the summit, but the Russian Federation will be represented by the Foreign Minister, Mr. Sergei Lavrov. Joining me now is CEO at Trade and Investment KZN, Mr. Neville Matjies. Good evening, Neville. It's lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, and good evening to all the listeners.
Thanks very much for making the time. So we're talking about what I imagine is filling most of your schedule in your diary for the rest of this month, which is the BRICS Summit in KZN. Neville, give us an overview of what's happening with the particular summit in this city and how it works alongside the main summit happening in Johannesburg.
So there's quite a number of side events that are taking place as a lead to the BRICS Summit. And a number of those side events are taking place in different provinces. In particular for KZN, in the last 3 weeks, we have seen the BRICS Youth Summit taking place. There's been a number of other dialogues that have taken place. On the 14th, there's a program which is being coordinated through Office of the Premier, specifically focusing on also dialogue in terms of opportunities. The 17th and 18th, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition will be coming through to KZN, also with potentially a delegation that will also be showcasing opportunities and also to have a business seminar where dialogue will be encouraged as well as business-to-business discussions. The BRICS Women Business Alliance will have its session in Durban on the 20th and 21st of August as well. At the ICC, again, encouraging women business owners to participate in the platform, showcase and exhibit their products, and also engage with delegates coming from the BRIC countries, as well as some delegates from the African continent. Those really become the precursor and a build-up towards the main summit, which will be taking place in Gauteng. The main summit in Gauteng is divided into two components. One is the BRICS Business Council, which specifically focuses on business element and, of course, the political dialogue. The political component of it is where the heads of state, of course, converse and specifically discuss areas of mutual collaboration, as we would have seen with the last summit that took place last year in China.
Yeah.
And in those dialogues, that's a closed session. Only, I think, 5 per country participate in that, a total of 25. So you will then understand that it will be President Ramaphosa plus 5. And in those discussions, really, they'd be focusing on all those areas, specific areas of collaboration.
Yeah.
You'll understand that the BRICS, really, when it was started, the intention was to create this dialogue amongst the emerging economies, and also to specifically see how trade and investment can be grown in these markets.
Neville, on that note, you've given a very good overview of what it means for regional BRICS activities in the run-up to the main summit, as you spoke of. Just to give further context to the listeners, is Durban the only region hosting multiple activities in the run-up to the main summit, or are other provinces having their own BRICS outputs?
So the program that is been led by the DTIC is actually moving, so they'll be starting in Gauteng, proceeding to the Western Cape, then to PE, then coming through to Durban. So it's a roadshow that will be going into those different markets. The Premier hosted also BRICS roadshow on the 1st of August, and that roadshow had also been to Mpumalanga, it had been to Limpopo and other provinces as well. The bulk of the preparations for all those engagements are through the Department of International Relations. And in particular, the Sherpa, which is the ambassador at large, Ambassador Suklal, who's really been championing the cause of BRICS for South Africa and participating quite aggressively in ensuring that we remain on the map.
Before I jump into what the outcomes or the focus areas may be for these particular activities happening regionally, the BRICS Roadshow, is that meant to educate and create awareness with general publics or to facilitate engagement with stakeholders in smaller areas so that you can pull them into the bigger workings of the bloc?
Yeah, so the intention really was to ensure that, there's adequate communication on what BRICS is about. A lot of people, of course, would read and want to understand what is this BRICS, you know.
Yeah.
So I think, just quickly, if you'll indulge me,
Sure.
just for the listeners who are not aware, you know, it includes Brazil, the Russian Federation, India, China, and South Africa. Mm-hmm. It was coined by a gentleman called Jim O'Neill in 2001 with a BRIC without the S at the end. And then South Africa joined in 2011. And the essence of this, of BRICS really is to promote trade and investment amongst these countries. If you look at the trade between these countries since the BRICS was established, total trade amongst these countries has more than quadrupled. So that in itself gets to show how important this bloc is. So when you look at South Africa going into these blocs, of course, we are still lagging behind in that our balance of trade is still quite skewed, particularly when you're looking at India and China.
Yes.
So we don't have a balanced trade with those countries. So this really will effectively look at how we create opportunities for us to get our products into those markets, as tough as some of them may be. But the BRICS really creates that conduit for us to be able to get into those markets.
And this makes sense, right? I think many, and you've correctly put together the articulation of what people perceive as the role of BRICS and how it has come about. But I think this year might be an important marker for real participation from businesses regionally, especially as you look at the different activities you're holding or have had already. One of them being the BRICS Youth Summit. I am aware of the Women in Business Alliance session coming up on the 20th and 21st of August. Neville, with all of these activities taking place, what in correlation with what the main BRICS Summit wants to achieve, what are some of the mandates that you're hoping to achieve with these outputs regionally?
I just need to indicate that, of course, BRICS is not organized by us. We are a support to the summit, like other agencies within South Africa.
And what would you hope as a supporting partner?
Specifically from a trade and investment perspective, would be to ensure that we can drive the business agenda. So the bilaterals that have been proposed,
yes.
We are championing those in collaboration and in support to the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition.
What are some of those themes, Neville?
That in itself creates also additional opportunities for companies to participate and become exhibitors at the main summit. Although they've been quite sticky in terms of the numbers, you'll recall, and it has been broadly announced that President Ramaphosa has not only limited the participation of the heads of state, he's invited all African heads of state. So you'll understand, if a lot of them participate, they will be bringing business delegations as well. So it's going to really create a huge hype of activities within the summit itself in Gauteng, as a spillover into provinces as well. We are engaging with DIRCO as well as the DTIC to ensure that we continue with side programs in provinces, particularly with the spillover of delegates, because Sandton can only hold X number of people. So all the spillovers are the ones that we're wanting to also tap into and to have side events with them, bilaterals, to encourage the dialogue around trade and investment.
And one question I really have for you is, alongside the main summit that's happening, what are the themes this year that BRICS is hoping to facilitate conversation and dialogue around? Is it a focus on women empowerment in the emerging economies? Is it a focus on technology? Is it a focus on leveling or stabilizing the playing field around how much of trade happens and who remains stronger in the bloc? What is it?
Thank you for the question. So if you look at the Women Business Alliance, their theme is quite clear: connect, collaborate, and contract. they call it the triple C's. So they are really trying to push a lot in terms of the development of women-owned businesses and projects that are linked to women-owned businesses. And the reason they are so aggressive is because, the women agenda, in as much as South Africa has really taken a lot of stride in pushing women empowerment, it's still not enough. So that's one right at the top of the list. Followed quite closely to that are other areas. From a sectoral basis, energy is, of course, right at the top of the agenda, particularly because it's coming to South Africa with the energy crisis that we have. Energy is really at the top of the list.
Yes.
They're also looking at technology and innovation, which is quite important, of course, with AI. It's important that we also tap into the learnings of the big governments such as China in terms of technology development. Agriculture is very, very important, particularly in innovation within the agricultural sector, which has become also quite key, particularly when you're looking at food security. With the war currently in Europe, that has also impacted quite negatively in terms of grain supply, etc. So those are just some of the themes that are driven quite exponentially. And of course, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement in driving the African agenda in marketing and promoting trade into and within the African continent.
To talk about that, Neville, many people are under the impression that many of the African countries are part of the BRICS bloc. Would it be fair to say that the African Union as a movement is hoping to be inspired or influenced by President Cyril Ramaphosa, as our country is one of the member states in the BRICS bloc? Do you feel that is the intention?
So I do know that a few years ago, even just before President Ramaphosa became head of state, when it was still under President Zuma, the mandate was given by the African South Africa, not keep on the representative, but to ensure that it champion the cause for Africa. And of course, the President Ramaphosa has been driving this quite aggressively, hence he has not closed the invitation to the African leaders. So all heads of state on the continent are invited to the BRICS summit. I don't have the exact figures as to how many have confirmed that. You would have to speak to Department of International Relations on. So the idea is not for South Africa to be seen as a big brother, but really as a conduit to ensuring that through our relations and our collaboration under the BRICS, we can create opportunities for the continent.
Of course, and creating opportunities for the continent means re-establishing or reaffirming the narrative that Africa is indeed a place ripe for innovation, as well as thriving and robust trade amongst ourselves, particularly in the technology, innovation and agriculture space. As a business forum, the Minara Chamber of Commerce and many other business forums, and Neville, you yourself are leading a unit of business governance in the province, to drive those trade missions. When a question from a general public's, anyone in the general public would come to you and say, well, we're actually worried about the influence that China or Russia may have over the rest of the countries in the BRICS bloc, particularly around the strength of their trading capability or the might of a nation like South Africa to lead in the technology and innovation space. What would you say to that?
Yeah, my theory to that is that so if we are afraid of partnering or collaborating with giants such as China, India for that matter, whom would we then be benchmarking against? Would we always have to lean on the West? I think as a bloc, the BRICS has really gone miles to show that as a global economy, these emerging markets can really be a force to be reckoned with. The BRICS, if you look at them as a group, they are currently contributing 26% to the world economy. Approximately 44% of the world population coming through the BRICS as well. And if you were to add perhaps one or two other emerging markets onto the block, imagine what it will do in terms of global trade. At the moment, there's, of course, heavy reliance on the West. I think through the BRICS, it becomes a great opportunity for us to become part of a market that can actually ensure that trade becomes effective. One of the biggest achievements of BRICS with the new development bank has been ensuring that when you do your trade and you're exporting your products, you can sell in rand and pay in rand and get paid in rand.
Yes.
As opposed to other areas where you are actually prone to currency fluctuations, etc., etc. So why shouldn't we be part of that? I think we need to look at it as a great plus for us to participate in this market. And if with us having a foot in it, we're able to also influence specific challenges that affect us from a global trade perspective with our partner countries.
Yeah.
Whether it's an imported product coming into our region or the protection of certain sectors. We're able to do it quite clearly and aggressively, and also get to understand how we can get our companies to link with some of the BRIC countries.
Neville, how, of course, this show is sponsored by the Minara Chamber of Commerce. What is the importance of chambers of commerce, which are the congregating partners in different parts of society and communities, bringing together everyone from a small business to a larger enterprise? How important is their role in helping manage the narrative around BRICS and what people understand about it?
Yeah, chambers are quite important because they can disseminate a lot of information to their businesses. The beauty about chambers of commerce is that they don't only represent big business. You know, a lot of people think a chamber only represents big business, but when you go into the chamber database, you'll realize that a lot of small businesses actually make the chamber of commerce up. So it really creates a great avenue for collaboration and for partnership and for understanding and learning, what is happening within the business environment, particularly topics such as the BRICS and other topics. So I think that linkage is quite important. The work that we do as Trade and Investment KwaZulu-Natal, we have to collaborate with chambers of commerce because they are the formalized structures of business.
Sure. And in collaborating with them, are you then saying to small business owners who are listening in on this show, apart from larger enterprises, that they too have a voice or a role to play in the BRICS activities coming up, in the main BRICS summit, keeping abreast of the news, understanding where the opening or entry points might be for them to either subcontract, collaborate, or be able to take part in a deal? Because sometimes it's overwhelming for a business community to understand a larger event happening around them, and geopolitical movements always seem so far removed from day-to-day business happening on the ground. But would you encourage small business to have an active interest in moving forward and being part of the narrative?
Yeah, 100%. Knowledge is power. It's important for them to empower themselves with the knowledge of what is currently happening. And based on that, they'll also get an opportunity to not only engage with foreign delegates, but also local companies. Because a lot of trade, you find that a lot of it starts from home. And once you know what the next company is doing and the other company is doing, then you're able to even source product locally. I remember a few years ago, we went to a trade show in Johannesburg. We took some companies, and those companies actually did a lot more trade with each other than they did with companies at the trade show. So it really creates an opportunity to learn and to know what is going on and to really be fully up to speed with the language of the BRICS and any other platform. Because remember, at the BRICS summit or at the side seminars that are taking place, they're not just focusing on BRICS, they're talking about opportunities within each sector. So if they're talking at the energy sector, they'll talk about renewable energy, they'll talk about gas to power, or et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of those, that's where you are able to then learn and really extract a lot of value.
As KZN, business, as the KZN business community, and as the head of a unit that's representing the interests of KZN business community in supporting this national and international event that's taking place in the country. What are KZN's value propositions that we're bringing to BRICS Summit this year, Neville?
Yeah, so first of all, when the delegation comes to the KZN led by the BRICS, the first priority was to ensure that we can showcase a lot of our catalytic projects that are already on the ground with the KZN. So those catalytic projects are private sector-led projects that really would seek to change the face of our province. The total value of the pipeline that we showcase is about 45 billion rand in terms of those projects. So that's the first area. Number two, we're looking at ensuring that we encourage intra-regional trade under the auspices of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. To see how we can also, by tapping into the African market that will be here, how we can actually get some of our products into the continent. And that becomes effectively an import replacement, in that you're replacing the import from outside of the continent destination to in the continent. So that's the second component. And then, of course, when the delegations are coming through, we are taking them to individual companies as well as to some of our key infrastructure projects that have been either developed or are still being developed. And we're showcasing some of our bright spots, such as the Port of Durban and the logistics around it, the cruise terminal. We're taking them through to the trade port, which is the IDZ. We're taking them to even some of the privately owned facilities to showcase really that KZN has got the ability to attract investors and we've got the ability to support investors. And the last thing is, of course, showcasing the fact that from a regulatory compliance perspective, we can support the companies coming through, to partner with our local companies through the one-stop shop, ensuring that we can tick the boxes specifically related to that biggest challenge, which is regulatory compliance.
Regulatory compliance, I think one of the key factors when someone wants to come and set up shop in a new region. Neville, we're going to finalize our conversation, which has been rather interesting. I have one or two more questions for you, but we'll take those up after the break.
Don't miss out on the grand opening of Bawa's Lifestyle Concept Store. We have crazy opening specials. Kenwood Air Fryer Oven was 2,500, now only 999. Kenwood Prospero Kitchen Machine was 4,999, now only 2,599. Russell Hobbs Stand Mixer for only 999. NutriBullet was 2,500, now only 999. Kenwood 3.8 litre air fryer was 1,500, now only 999. Kenwood Chef was 4,999, now only 2,999. DeLonghi coffee machine for only 2,999. Catch these insane discounts and so much more in store at the Bawa's Concept Lifestyle Store this Friday, the 28th of July, 8 a.m. at 439 Victoria Road, Pietermaritzburg.
My Cajun prawn. Every square inch of you is irresistibly tasty. Your base, your toppings, perfecto. But now you must go out into the world. Show them what you're made of.
Order ready!
Every Pizza Boy Square pizza is crafted to perfection, so while it's hard to say goodbye, we know they're going to a good place. Visit pizzaboys.co.za. We don't cut corners. You can taste it.
Bread is a daily necessity, the best form of sadaqah. From the inception of the bread drive in 2019, the Al Ansar Foundation has distributed almost 400,000 loaves of bread. As the needs keep growing, so does our bread distribution. These loaves are distributed to lessen the financial burden of deserving families, schools, old age homes, respite centers, orphanages, and deserving community members. Help us help those in need of the daily necessity. The Al Ansar Foundation, committed to zero hunger. Donate now. Visit our website on www.alansar.org.za.
Radio Al Ansar, 24/7, 365.
Welcome back to Business Matters, brought to you by the Minara Chamber of Commerce. I am Nazreen Ibrahim. We're talking about the BRICS Summit coming up in Durban on the 17th and 18th of August, supported by Trade and Investment KZN. We're speaking with Neville Matjies, CEO at Trade and Investment KZN. Neville, you took us through a very comprehensive view of the activities that are supporting the run-up to the main event in Johannesburg coming up later in August. One of them, there are quite a few, I think around 4 in KZN. What are the value propositions that KZN can offer? And we've also addressed some questions of perceptions that the local public or any stakeholder may have who are outside of the broader BRICS narrative. To end off this very interesting conversation, I wish we had a lot more time to talk to you. What are some of the things you want KZN, the business community in KZN, to remember, and just people in general to understand about what this particular BRICS summit is going to mean and represent going into the next 3 to 4 years, running up to 2025? Many countries, many organizations and international organizations have commitments around sustainability with a carbon zero future, around making sure that we have more equity, diversity and inclusion. What is some of the things that you want the business community to remember?
I think the most important thing is, especially participating in a lot of these dialogues, is the understanding how international trade works and how different it is from doing business with China to doing business with Brazil or Russia or India. I think that's quite important to understand. Number 2 is by having a lot of these countries here, they come also with a lot of their senior officials who are able to assist in unlocking doors within their respective markets. Number 3 is also understanding what it is that you are selling and how you can package it and sell it to these markets, these specific markets. I think that those are quite critical, and also understanding that, as I've indicated earlier, President Ramaphosa is quite emphatic about ensuring the link within the African continent, is that there is a much bigger market within the continent that you're also able to tap into, and utilizing this conduit and having a lot of these African countries here. A lot of our companies can understand what the biggest African market has to offer. I had a company, I was flying from Johannesburg to Durban, and I was sitting next to a gentleman who had done a lot of trade exhibitions outside of the continent, in Europe in particular, and was struggling to enter those markets. And I asked him a question, have you looked at Botswana? Have you looked at Swaziland or Mozambique? And he'd never, ever considered those markets. Today, those are his largest client base, because he then went up and investigated those markets and is now able to export his products into those countries. So it really creates that avenue for companies to then bear that in mind, that there is a bigger market out there, but then an even bigger one right next door.
And on that note, to end off our conversation, you talked about going into new markets, and going into new markets also makes you understand how to price things, what things cost, what currency are you going to work in. Will the de-dollarization conversation be happening in any part, form or shape at our summit activities in Durban?
I can't really speak with authority on that, because that you would have to take it up directly with the BRICS Secretariat. But what I can tell you is what the BRICS Development Bank, the new development bank, has done. It has created an avenue for you to trade in your own currency. So you don't even worry about the dollar, because you sell in rand and you buy in rand, and you're buying a product from the big partner countries. So that in itself has created a huge opportunity. The Africa Import and Export Bank also has specific tools to support intra-country product purchasing. So within partnership with a new development bank, that creates a great avenue around that. So the de-dollarization, I can't really talk too much about it.
Sure.
Of course, course, one has read quite a bit about that. But for me, the excitement is being able to trade in your own currency.
Absolutely. And I think what you've just made me realize is that the next show is ripe to talk about the opportunities of how that will look in different scenarios, as well as whether that has a digital component to it, whether it's available as a crypto format, if it's a digital wallet, what does it look like in terms of the African continent and regulatory compliance around the financial component. But it was such a pleasure to speak with you, Neville. Thank you very much for your time this evening. And we're looking forward to seeing you at the BRICS Summit coming up on the 17th and 18th of August.
Thank you. And by the way, just to remind you that the 17th and 18th is the road show.
Yes.
The main summit is actually taking place in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
So it's part of that road show with the DTIC.
Okay, so just to be clear for all listeners, 17th and 18th is actually a road show. KZN is hosting a number of activities in the run-up to the main summit, which, Neville, please remind us on the dates of that again.
Roadshow is 17th and 18th of August.
Yeah.
And then the BRICS Women Business Alliance will be the 20th and 21st of August.
Sure.
And then the summit itself on the 22nd of August in Johannesburg.
And where, if listeners need to get information, can they get it for Trade and Investment KZN?
Yes, you can get information not related to the main summit because we are not organizers of that. The roadshow, we're happy to share information. If you are able to send an email to cmudley at TIKZN, so co.za. My colleague Claude Mudley is the one that's driving that program.
Is that C like cat, C for cat?
Yes, C for cat or Charlie.
Okay, cool. But I would go with the cat. Cat's my favorite animal. But thank you very much, Neville. It was a pleasure to speak with you, and thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again.
Thank you so much. Brilliant.
So you were listening to Neville Matjies, CEO at Trade and Investment KZN, talking about the all-important BRICS Summit Roadshow happening in KwaZulu-Natal. There are 4 elements that have been taking place or are to take place. One of them is the BRICS Youth Summit, which has already happened. The BRICS Women in Business Alliance is happening on the 20th and 21st of August. You heard him explain that some of the main focus areas for the BRICS main summit coming up in Johannesburg later in the month is around energy, technology and innovation, agriculture, a focus on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. You also heard him speak about, I asked about the de-dollarization conversation, where while that may happen in parts or in closed discussions, there certainly are opportunities for how to trade in your own currency. And I think that the next show will be a good place to have a conversation around what that looks like, how you can participate, and what are the components or the elements that you would need to participate with. We talked about the digital wallet or a form of cryptocurrency. These things are available to us because it's quite easy to set up either an e-wallet system with an existing bank. Again, it would be interesting also to know how the traditional banking sector has any role to play in this new era of being able to trade in our own currency, going up against the traditional superpowers of currency trade like the G7 countries. I'm quite excited. So I'm hoping that when Anwar Mullah is back, he has that lined up as a conversation. It will be really cool to see. We've been just talking to Neville Matjies, CEO at Trade and Investment KZN, about the upcoming BRICS Summit Roadshow that's happening. So we must not confuse it. I know it's easy in conversation to confuse it with the main summit happening in Johannesburg. But the roadshow that's happening in KZN, as there are other activities happening countrywide in different regions. I know I was in PE on Sunday to speak at SACI, which is the South African Association for the Conference Industry, on AI tools for events and navigating new frontiers. And as I got into the airport in PE, I saw a BRICS delegation welcoming committee for a delegation arriving. When I got to the venue that I was staying at for the conference, one of the ladies representing Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality spoke to me about how it seemed to be a very closed session and that not everyone was invited to that. So the movements around what's going on with BRICS representation in the country are quite interesting, but it certainly does not mean that we can't have participation in that. It's to know where to have that participation. In KwaZulu-Natal, where we are, we've got an opportunity to have that participation on the 17th and 18th of August. You've got the roadshow happening in KZN. You can email cmudley at tikzn.org.za. If I am not mistaken, I'm just going to quickly double-check Trade and Investment KZN's website to check that URL is correct. and give you the right email address. But if I heard Neville correctly, it was cmodli@tikzn.org.za. I'm just going to double check that for you quickly. The other opportunity is the BRICS Women in Business Alliance Summit taking place on the 20th and 21st of August at the ICC. This is going to be an interesting space because particularly for a focus on the woman entrepreneur in the emerging economy around empowerment through technological capability and empowerment, as well as the focus on different areas of provision for trade and investment. And those are going to be necessary conversations to have. Because while women have representation across the board in different regions, in the emerging economies, our challenges are a little bit different, perhaps, to the developed economies. They are a little different because a woman not only have to navigate the territory of regulatory compliance, the regulatory minefield sometimes, including understanding the funding scenario or where they could get the capability in terms of financial aid to work from, but it's also understanding cultural nuances. While this is not a different conversation from what happens in the developed world, it certainly is more pronounced because of the ethnic or cultural backgrounds that we come from in the developed world. So that's an interesting one that's going to be investigated, I think, at the upcoming BRICS Women in Business Alliance Summit, which I'm really looking forward to. In other news, I would say it's vitally important for, I always say this, of course, because I come from a tech background, but it's really important for people to be aware of the tech conversation happening in this country. If you are not aware, the South African AI Association launched in mid-July. I would encourage you to become a member. You can become an individual member. If you're a company, I think there is a small fee, but it's necessary to become part of this organization. You can go to South African AI, I think it's SAAIA.com and register as a member. Again, while I'm speaking to you, to round up, let me look quickly for the TIKZN website as well as the South African AI Association. And this is necessarily important because South Africa, as an example, does not have a national AI conversation, nor do we have an AI strategy in place like other countries do. We know China has already developed multiple policies around AI. The other countries in the BRICS bloc are starting to develop those. We have small conversation happening in closed spaces in this country, but we need to move quicker enough. And especially if we're going to stand as a country of might in the BRICS conversation, having a real input in a national AI conversation is going to be important. I have to say to this point, there is no company too big or small to contribute to that. And I would urge you to go to the South African AI Association, just search for them on Google, become a member, and keep track of the conversations and movements happening. All right. Before we leave, this show is brought to you by the Minara Chamber of Commerce. Remember that you can please submit nominations, both for businesses and professionals, for the Minara Business Awards. These are still open. You can visit the website, minara.org.za, or email kzn@minara.org.za for the nomination form. We encourage women-owned and young Muslim entrepreneurs to apply. The benefits from such platforms recognize your business achievements firstly, and you're given the opportunity to market your business to an entire new audience. So we welcome all nominations on that. They're still open. We encourage you to visit the website, please. It's minara.org.za. You've been listening to this edition of Business Matters, brought to you by the Minara Chamber of Commerce. I am Nazreen Ibrahim. This is Al Ansar.
Radio Al Ansar Podcasts.